Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on when you are listening to this. This is the Fractional Edge podcast. My name is Carol Fraser. I am your host today. And remember, what we're talking about today is fractional executives as it pertains to workforce planning, because let's face it, the talent war is on again, guys, and you need to find the right kind of talent with the right kind of skills to make sure your company has the competitive edge.
Welcome to the Fractional Edge, the turbocharged podcast that's your one-way ticket to unlocking the full potential of your workforce planning. I'm your host, Carol Fraser, a workforce planning whiz, fractional chief human resources officer, and a CEO who's been around the block and probably tripped over a few HR manuals along the way. With over 4 successful ventures under my belt, I've mastered the art of navigating the challenges faced by small and medium-sized businesses like yours. Get ready to dive deep into the exhilarating world of fractional executive staffing strategies, where every twist and turn is designed to turbocharge your business success and leave you ready to supercharge your company. From hilarious success stories to side-splitting strategies, we've got the inside scoop to optimize your business and keep you grinning from ear to ear. Let's rev up those engines and dive headfirst into the fast lane of business brilliance.
So my guest today is Mark. He is a Chief Operations and Commercial Officer, but there are so many things dangling from that title. So Mark, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell our audience everything that you do.
Awesome. Thanks, Carol. I appreciate you having me here on your podcast. There's a lot that goes into that title. It is people, process, technology, operations. It's really cultivating everything into one to come up with a strategic business partner that pushes your business forward, not just in the people aspect or in the commercial of a product or a service, but in your marketing, in your communications, in your sales process, in your technology. There's a lot of technologies out there that everyone's on the AI buzz. Oh my gosh, AI. How are we actually using it? Where are we appropriating AI into our everyday? And how is it helping business get better, right? How is it helping people get better? What's the purpose of that? So I dive in and do a lot of discovery to get a lot of business owners or some of the executives that I try to advise into the right direction to get out of working in the business per se to work on the business. A lot of people love to grow. I love to grow businesses. I love to build things and have them come to fruition. Tell me what that looks like to you. What are your aspirations? I mention a lot about a SOAR analysis. I do discovery, I do SWOT and SOAR analysis. I was just on a cohort call yesterday, and I mentioned that, and somebody said, well, what's SOAR? And I'm like, look it up. Just look up SOAR analysis. Look it up for me. But the A is the peak of that. It's your aspirations. As a CEO, what do you want to do from your aspirations? What do you want to be remembered as? Is it just your product, your service? Or is it the relationships you built giving that excellent product or service along your business journey? So it encapsulates a lot, to your point.
Wow. I mean, like, you get both really deep, but really wide when you're going into clients. That's, many times, and some of our past guests have really focused on hyper specialty. And I think that that's got a place for it, especially when markets these days, you need to differentiate, and sometimes getting a hyper specialist will really help you do that.
Sure.
But then when you aren't operating efficiently and you're not leveraging the tools, I want to dig deeper on this working in versus working on your business. That's where someone with your skills comes in and kind of pulls back the curtain and says, I don't know if you saw this, but, we could probably do this better so you have more time to do your magic.
Yep.
What kind of stories do you have about this whole in and on the business that you've seen?
Great question. I can just remember probably about a month ago talking to a fractional chief operating officer friend of mine, Dominic, and he's like, Mark, I have a client that's in the area that we could probably both work on. And I'm like, awesome, let's do it. He talked to the two owners. It's a partnership. They're in the logistics and supply chain space. Unfortunately, they work constantly. It's a $20 million business, probably about 30 employees. So they're doing really well for themselves, right? But they're stuck. They do payroll, they do everything. And unfortunately, it's a female and a male partnership. The male is going through a ton of turmoil in their personal life, unfortunately, because they work all the time. Wife wants a divorce. That's a social impact as well, right? So how do we get that partner out from working in the business and doing everything on the day-to-day, all the transactional work that they're thinking that they're adding value? You're not going to add that much value now. You've grown way above that adding value in that startup phase. How do you add more value? So the process is to go in, do a discovery, and figure out everything that you're doing that you don't need to do that's transactional. Get you out of doing those everyday transactional pieces, but with certain oversight, and then move you into building those relationships and growing that business even more. Or just sitting back for a few months, trusting someone to do what you do every day on the daily transaction and enjoying some of the money that you've grown your business into and that revenue. How do you make it sustainable, right? You don't want to burn out. You want sustainable growth. How do you grow sustainably and build that retention on a customer basis and on an employee basis? You have to focus on that. So I think this partner is spreading themselves very thin, and they don't know how to get out of that. Hey, I'm analysis paralysis. I'm stuck right here. What do I do from here? They reached out to my friend Dom, and unfortunately, I can't have a happy ending to the story, Carol. They've ghosted him, and they're not getting back to him at all. So the one partner, the female's going, gosh, his life's a mess. I do not want this moving forward for me. We need help. They've reached out. They've come to this self-awareness and said, oh my gosh, we really need help. And those are the kind of people that are excellent for me to dive into. You've come to the realization that you need some help, but I don't know where. Let's go through that. I can help you out in that fashion.
Yeah, and I love entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And there is a moment where you do need to be all things with all hats,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And what we usually try to do as fractional leaders is help them recognize where that's no longer a strength for them and it's actually pulling them back.
Right.
And I appreciate that there's people out there like you who are willing to come in and say, there's answers to these questions. And, what you thought you were an expert in while you were making $20 million and hiring 30 people, things change.
They do.
And there are ways to do this maybe smarter, easier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very interesting.
I like to call it optimizing the chaos that ensues, right? Because it gets chaotic for an entrepreneur or a small business owner, right? No matter if you're 10 people or even if you're 100 plus, that can be still an entrepreneurial endeavor where you really need to step back and look at optimizing what you have.
I had a colleague of mine say part of her role is protecting owners from themselves.
Yes. I love that. That's awesome.
So when did you decide to become a fractional? What kind of drove you to this new industry of fractional executives?
It's a great question. And I think I've been dabbling and probably wrestling with it for a while now. A lot of my career, Carol, has been in early career. For 25 years. I've been doing what is recruiting, talent, everything employee experience, right? And from that, the first half of my career was in large enterprise companies. And I said, great, let me gain experience, see what goes on, see product from R&D through manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, and then out the door to delivery, everything in between. From your regular institutional markets to product, everything that you can, your general and administrative business to your manufacturing and supply chain. I did that. And unfortunately, within the world of recruiting and HR, it's constant layoffs. and it's downsizing, and it's getting rid of whole departments. And for me, that's a roller coaster that I don't know if I don't like being on that. I do like roller coasters, right? But I don't like being on those roller coasters. So it's a constant every 3 years, every whatever, 4 years. I think the longest engagement that I've had as a full-time opportunity has been 5 years. Everything has been shorter because of mergers and acquisitions and or downsizing within certain companies. And I think there's only 2 or maybe 3 positions that I've actually said, let me leave for a better opportunity, or that I've quit from over my 25-year career. The last 2 have been RIFs, reduction in forces. We're doing this, reduction in force. And for me, I'm like, I would love to have a portfolio career moving forward that services customers or clients that sees the value that we add as fractional leaders and fractional executives, come in as an expert, do what we need them to do, and keep those relationships for a long-term engagement, right? It could be 20 hours a week and then say, listen, we've done with this problem. We've finished this episode pretty much. Let's dial it back. And I could just do advisory services or something else to the new people that you're bringing on as you're growing until we need to dive back in again. And then we all have these cycles of business, right? So we have a new product or a new service. Oh, we might need Mark or somebody else in the fractional community to step in to help us get over these hurdles. You don't need to hire full-time all the time, right? Let's look at your organizational design. Let's look at your development. What does that tap into? Let's strategize. A lot of people don't really understand human capital strategy and organizational design for scalable growth. And that's where I see myself fitting in this market. Everyone's like, I want to grow. I want to grow. Well, how do you do that efficiently and effectively?
Yeah. It's that you just said 5 big words that probably scared our listeners, which is human capital management and organizational design.
Yeah.
Those are big words, but
Yeah.
in simplest terms, it's if you want to scale, or even if you want to become more efficient, those are the couplings, because you need people to be scalable or successful
Yeah.
or efficient. And they're big words, but the activities and the outcomes are not, moving mountains.
No.
It's one of those things in workforce planning that we basically say, I could go crazy with a 75,000 employee company and it'll take me 2 years. Or if I've got 30 people, it'll take me a little bit of time. But what you're getting out of it is a foundation,
right,
that you can scale.
Yep.
And, I think one of the things I've heard on our podcast is why, when I had our fractional CFO, is why do people not recognize, that they're not doing well, right? And that they're going to need to do a layoff. Like, how did that just all of a sudden come up?
Right.
Like, how are they not looking at the financials?
Yeah.
When you do have good workforce planning, good job architecture, good
Yep.
org design, good
Yep.
operations, your line of sight of what could be is much clearer. And so, that's where honestly fractional, if you are kind of uncertain of whether or not you need full time, if you go fractional, you are less likely to have to probably do a layoff because you don't have people sitting on the bench. They're only working for what you've hired them to do. And I just, from the services world, you always look at that billability. And if they're at 80%, you're like, they got 20% on the bench. That's not billable. And I always say, why not go fractional?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
How does that resonate with you?
Yeah. One of the questions for my most recent past opportunity where I was from the chief people officer who I reported to, he's like, Mark, let me know what the blended model looks like for you. And it was all about workforce planning. And I said, that's a great question. What do we have right now and what's working and what's not? Right. So I believe in data, and more data. Right. So it's data and analytics. Do we have the systems to tell us what's working and what's not? Let's dive into it. Get those numbers. The numbers tell a story. And then you appropriate that story to people, product, and services. And from there, I said, well, let's do a blended model. Let's mix it 50-50 or 60-40, right? Let's give our people opportunity to grow into some of these roles. Let's do a try and buy. We have a team right now that is 50% here, or if we want to move to a 70-30 model, what is our forecast, right? What are we looking at in the business? How are we drawing up some of those data and analytics about our market penetration for our product and our service? What are we targeting? And that dives into finance. And I love working with FP&A folks because you really get into workforce planning with FP&A, and you dive into your S&OP, your strategic operations, and your process. How do you do that? And what's the cadence? I met every week with FP&A and S&OP. Every week we had a call of what we were doing from production, what we were delivering for operations, and then what our customers were expecting to move forward. And we were trying to get a good handle on our forecasting. And then that led to great workforce planning and organizational design. It's not, those might be scary terms, but they actually are people in a seat that actually do the work for us. So it's not just this abstract thought, oh, what's organizational design? What is workforce planning? They're not just terms, they're actually results driven by people that are doing this task or the strategy every week. That's how that resonated with me. And we came up with a great process, and I leaned on the FP&A people to come up with formulas to dive into money and allocation and operations and how we were actually appropriating different people for our forecasts from a business. And that's what we say. Every company goes out and says, we want to grow this much this year. Great. How are we doing it? And who is doing it for us? That's workforce planning, and that's organizational design.
You know, it's interesting listening to you talk and just really having this dialogue, as we're both people who, you know, have dipped our toe in almost all of the areas of a business with primarily our vision on the most important asset of an organization, the people. One of the things around the fractional movement, which, you know, I was asked this question, and so I said, can I borrow that question for my podcast, is there's a lot of people entering this fractional market. And one of the things that I think the listeners, you know, maybe need to start asking yourself is the efficacy and the impactfulness of each fractional, like the quality of that fractional. Given, you know, even earlier I said there's a place for specialists, and then there's a place for people who have a broader view. When you think about what you bring as far as quality to your clients, do you generally come in on a much broader scale? And then when you see the pocket of opportunities for specialists, do you bring specialists in? Is that kind of how you generally operate with your clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's doing discovery calls and listening and asking them what are their pain points, what's really keeping them up at night. That's the differentiator of bringing the broad spectrum and then diving into the specialist piece. And what I'm doing is I partnered and even just connected and networked with multiple amounts of people over the past year, right? And that's how we met. It's a warm introduction. Hey, Mark, do you know Carol? No, I don't, but it seems like we, thrive in the same circles. Let's connect. It was a warm introduction. And from there, you drill down on, I could take learning and development for an example, right? I know some really key people that do some great classwork and are great with running and facilitation and everything else. Have I done that in the past? Yes, I have. Do I want to just focus on that? No, I'd rather bring in, my friend Michelle and say, Michelle writes the content. She can deliver the content and put together some learning and development and leadership development courses for that, right? I have another person who's Maggie. Maggie does that as well as leadership development is her thing. I would tap them on the shoulder and go, hey, we really could use this. So when you think about overarching construct, I like to listen and say, where are your pivotal points right now in your business that you feel stuck at? Is it learning and development? Is it workforce planning? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Well, is it operations? Let's dive in and pinpoint that and get a solution on the books for you. Let's see what that looks like. And I like to say it's ROI driven. What is your return on this investment? What are we going to get out of it? Right. So it's a broad approach at first. It's listening, and then it's going into and saying, you know what, I think I have a solution for you. How's this sound to you?
So then what kind of clients have you been working with? What's your target client? Where do you have the greatest impact?
I would say it is the $5 million to $50 million folks that are out there that are either stuck or looking to grow and scale. I love building things. I probably mentioned that before. So scaling a business, growing a business. The last company I was with full-time was a startup. They were at the 200 person size of a company. And myself and the folks on my team, we were able to double that size within a year's time, 200 to 400 people. I partnered with FP&A, the S&OP folks, and some other executives, but we doubled it and increased retention by 30%. How did we do that? Everyone, of course, I would love to increase retention, right? Because that attrition costs you ROI. It costs you ARR. It's typically not calculated, but I know the calculations of it. Your CFO typically is not going to dive into that, but I'm going to go, hey, by the way, let's look at these numbers because this is cost. It's not on your balance sheet, but I'm going to point it out to you. So those are the different things that we can dive into. That was a little bit bigger startup, right? That was in their C and D round of funding. I would love to dive in earlier and get into those A and B round of funding or seed round. I do advisory services as well. Right now, I've been an advisor for a year for a company that's a pioneering HR tech stack where they offer a great service. It's called Wowledge. And it's really geared towards those HR professionals that their teams have been decimated over the past 2 or 3 years. Carlos is a great friend of mine. He's an ex-Deloitte guy, very smart, comes to the table with a lot, but we go and talk at least once or twice a month about go-to-market strategies. What's his ROI on his ICP? Who are they? Everything else in between, your user interface, your website, how the website flows and what that looks like from a user perspective. So there's a lot of different things we dove into over the past year. And I'm not the only person that he taps into. He taps into a ton of other people, probably 20 or 30 different people to say, how does this look? How does this receive with the business or the people that I'm looking to attract my product to? Because it really is a great product. It facilitates a lot of the conversations with white papers put together in front of people. So it leads the conversation. It builds out different strategies and frameworks for you instead of you having to go and do it on your own. So it's a really great leadership tool in creating some great conversations. But that's what that looks like. It's pretty cool stuff.
So if this fractional thing, I think, it's got movement and people are starting to understand it and we've got a good listenership. And, what kind of myths do you want to help dispel around the fractional world and how it adds value, detracts value, whatever it is that you're thinking, that these CEOs and founders and owners are still contemplating in their heads?
I want them to think a little bit differently, and it takes that growth mindset, right? We're typical of saying, I need a full-time or I need a consultant, and that's it. And even now, interim is another term that comes in for consultant, right? I need a consultant and an interim person. Well, fractional is very different than that. It's a relationship, right? It's not just on it for a certain time and then you're off again. It's, hey, how can I help you build your business for a long term? I'm not in here for the short term, 3 or 6 months. I want a relationship. I'm invested in your business. You want me to manage people? Absolutely, I'll manage people. Am I tied to your ARR or your ROI? Yes, I want to be tied to those numbers and the finances as well. I don't want just the external person looking in. I want to be that internal person and have that vantage point. Let me open up the books and be transparent and trust me as well as you would trust an internal full-time person. So those are the myths that I've heard. And here to dispel that the fractional piece isn't even growing. I'm in a group in a Slack community that had probably 2,000 people in it probably this time last year. I'd say within the year, now they have 9,000 people in that group, in that fractional community. So is it growing? It's tripled or quadrupled in about a year. That is massive growth in interest into doing fractional work. And I think you're bringing in leaders that don't need ramp up time. They probably need a discovery call that lasts about an hour. And then they have some way of moving forward on either a solution or giving up different opportunities that can lead options to lead towards solutions.
I like how you've kind of brought in the other roles that are atypical, right? It's like I need a consultant because I have this project.
Right.
And I want a full-time person, but I want a unicorn full-time person because I have 6 different jobs and I only want one person and I'm going to shove it all together.
Oh my gosh.
And, those are for a moment in time, a while back, that worked, right? Those things worked. Where we're just with now 6 generations, as I just had one of my sons graduate, 6 generations in the workforce. Every one of those generations has a different way to approach work. Every one of those people have amazing skills and knowledge and magic, and not all of them want to work full time. And I think it's dispelling the myth that we are not invested. I think, honestly, when people are able to lean into the 1, 2, 3 things that they would rather do every single solitary day, as opposed to the 20 things where 17 of them are things that you don't want to do, you get more value out of that individual than the one who is drudging to try to finish the 17 things only to be able to do the 3 things that they like.
Right.
And you wonder why you have competing priorities. I can't hear that all the time. I couldn't get that done. I have a competing priority. I have another deliverable. All of that mushing together of people call it unicorn. I call it Frankencorn because it's kind of Frankenstein.
That's a great
unicorn.
Term. Right.
It's thinking about what you could do with fractionals is going to be, give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
It's just like anybody else. You could let them go if it's not working out, but you have a whole lot less risk legally when you let a fractional go than if you did that person that you hired. So very interesting. So what's one piece of advice that you would give that client that you work with between 5 and 50 million? What would be one piece of advice given your magic that you would like to give them?
One piece of advice is take a little bit of calculated risk on someone in the fractional space. If you haven't really endeavored to look into that or engage with anyone recently, give them a shot. It's a different thought process, and they'll probably have all of the answers that you need, or they know someone in the space that's another fractional that could get you where you want to get to. So have an open mind.
Nice. That's great advice.
Yeah.
So what is the one question that you wished we would have asked you?
Oh gosh, that's a real good one, Carol. Apart from loving what I do in people, process, technology, and operations, and diving more into fractionals, I'm also a family man, right? Favorite sports, I love hockey. I grew up in a hockey family. I still play a little bit. Now I'm coaching my son's team, right? So I have a wife so it's the work-life balance, right? We love the freedom of having that fractional interaction, but also the family life and that work balance. I think that's what people are really looking forward to, is that overall health and wellness. And that goes into having a good, well-balanced, prioritized schedule. I am well unbalanced in certain days where my wife's like, "Are you going to stop today?" And I'm like, "Yes, you're right. I need to stop." So I am a family man, apart from loving what I do during the day and even at night, sometimes calling and talking to people. A healthy balance is what we need. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Absolutely. So I have a follow-up. So you're the data guy, right?
Yes.
You have any data around how much more ARR or ROI your company can have when you provide a work-life balance for employees?
Those are great questions. I love it. What I can leave you with is I know some great people that offer services. I signed some NDAs, so I can't tell you who they are, but hit me up and I might be able to go into expound other areas. But I've met with 3 different companies that offer engagement surveys, social surveys about your people, and how regular life takes away the priority and the time from their impact in the business, and how much more money you can make as a company by offering these different services by knowing what that data point is.
Got it. Okay, so I'm hearing through the cryptic words that there is a financial benefit
Oh, yes,
to
absolutely.
organizations
Yep.
when you can provide a work-life balance.
Absolutely, 100%. And the tools that I'm talking about really go into asking the employees the right questions so you can actually look at what is important to them, and then you can meet that need from an overall health and wellness perspective. And that employee puts out more ROI, right? They're peaking at, it's the 80-20 rule. You're never going to get 100% out of an employee. You want 80%. Right? And you want to strive for that. And then there's other things that come into place. We're human beings with other outside forces that press in every day. There's other emergencies. We all have kids. We have families. My wife's been taking care of an elderly parent for the past year. That affects your everyday correspondence and engagement. So what makes employees more engaged? Time is money. And if you have their time, but if it's focused time on that task at hand, then it's going to be increased your ROI, and it's going to be sustainable as well. So there are different numbers out there.
Look at you, the data guy.
Thank you.
So how can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I've had some podcasts out there on YouTube as well as this one now is to be included. But LinkedIn is one of the best places to find me on LinkedIn. Or you could just Google my name, Mark Coscarello, and my information will show up. And one of the top things is LinkedIn. My daughter said to me the other day, she goes, "Dad, I Googled you, and all it was LinkedIn all over." I said, that's where I live. It's the network for professionals.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Mark, and all the information that you've given our listeners. And listeners, hey, you know what? Share this podcast. People need to better understand the impact that fractionals can have for your small business. And we can really bring the expertise to your doorstep so that you can have the competitive edge. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Fractional Edge podcast. We hope you had as much fun as we did in unraveling the mysteries of workforce planning and fractional executives. If you're feeling pumped to unleash your competitive edge, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your fellow trailblazers, and subscribe to ensure you never miss out on our electrifying episodes. If you want to dive deeper into the wisdom shared on today's podcast, head over to our website, thefractionaledge.com, where we can help you connect with guests, explore exciting collaboration opportunities, and subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time, keep your business soaring, take care, stay inspired, and we'll see you on our next podcast.